Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. We do have something a little bit different for you today because we're going to be taking a look at some of the hot prospects for Celtic's future who left the club and spent seasons on loan at what we will call lesser clubs. Our very own man Ewan Davidson has been spending basically the last week speaking to the fans of these so-called lesser clubs. Talking to people is what Ewan does for a living. He loves it. Ewan, talk us through the process of, first of all, finding fans of these clubs and then what you did and the kind of responses you got in general.
Well, first off, yeah, I do like talking to people, just never approach me. Secondly, it was just a case of, so there was a mixture of things. So some folk got in touch with me over Twitter. There were a couple of people I knew from CSCs who lived in as far-flung places as Birkenhead. So that made it quite easy to find a Tranmere fan, yeah, it's just kind of sourcing. It was good fun. I had some really interesting conversations. So yeah, quite excited to feedback on what I found for you, Hamish.
You spoke to fans of the aforementioned Tranmere Rovers, Clyde,
Yep.
Queen's Park, Dunfermline Athletic, and even over in Ireland with Cliftonville. Between all of them, we got a proper review on Lee O'Connor, Ewan Otto, Luca Connell, Ryan Mullen, Brodie Patterson, Ewan Henderson, Kerr McInroy, and Barry Coffey. So we did go all out. We're going to just run through each of these players on this video and each of the contributors and basically hear what they had to say, a snapshot into what these players have been doing over the last 12 months or so, and then we'll bring it back to Celtic and look forward to what these players can possibly produce for Celtic, whether they'll make the cut, etc. Who do you want to start with?
I'll go with Barry Coffey first. Now, this was thanks to a contributor called Declan Coleman, who is a Cliftonville and Celtic supporter. And what Declan said was about Barry Coffey, he's brought a more exciting edge to our game. I think it's fair to say Cliftonville weren't having the best of seasons until Coffey arrived. I think one of the best things we've seen from him is he can be a long-range specialist. He won Goal of the Month recently with a brilliant strike from outside the box against Carrick in a 5-0 win. Declan says, I would 100% take Coffey back for another year to try and see what he could do with us for the full season. But selfishly, as a Celtic fan too, I would like to see him in a better league. It's really interesting because I think the Barry Coffey loan kind of went under the radar, but if you ask anyone from the academy, what I've heard is that Coffey's a really interesting prospect. He was brought in from a youth system in Ireland, and he's maybe really, really impressing Darren O'Dea, Stephen McManus, etc. So don't be surprised to see his name make a few more squads in the next couple of years.
Yeah, he's part of that Ireland under 19/21 setup that we've got at the club. Luca Connell, Jonathan Afolabi, Lee O'Connor as well. So Barry Coffey, as much as he didn't come in at the same time as those three, I think he came in a bit earlier. He's very much of the same kind of ilk. That did seem quite a positive, glowing reference for Coffey's time at Cliftonville. Whenever I hear English people chatting about the Scottish game, I absolutely can't stand whenever they besmirch the name and the standard of Scottish football. So I'm going to do my best to avoid that.
Farmers League.
Yeah,
my nan could score 100 goals, etc.
I don't want to be accused of double standards, and I know that I watch these YouTube channels down south, and whenever, say Eddie Howe, for example, comes up in the conversation, it's always, he's going to a league where he'll win every game and all that. So I don't want to do the same with Coffey at Cliftonville, but I would like to see him at a higher level next season. Now, whether that higher level is a Scottish Premiership team, or whether it's down south, or whether he's going to be part of this Celtic Colts setup. Now, I know that wouldn't necessarily be a higher level, playing in the Lowland League, but I do think it would be good to have him, closer to home and let people actually get a good look at him. But the future seems bright for young Coffey. Who next, Ewan?
So at Dunfermline Athletic, we've got Kerr McInroy and Ewan Henderson. This came courtesy of Ricky Lord, who was fantastic and really forthcoming with his comments. We'll go with Kerr McInroy first. I think he's flown a bit under the radar as opposed to Ewan Henderson. Obviously, Ewan Henderson's already been in the first team, so we know a bit more about him. But in terms of Kerr McInroy, also, should go with saying that Kerr McInroy was Ewan Henderson's captain at youth level, and they've been friends for a very, very long time. So it's quite a nice move, actually, a bit of sentiment to it. So Ricky says, Kerr started the season strongly and was playing in the centre of midfield. He would give a solid 7 out of 10 every week without ever standing out. He may have been a victim of circumstances as the manager changed formations and lineups to try and find a winning side, and he only started 11 games this season. Most of them were kind of early on. Kerr, whilst not being outstanding, didn't ever put a foot wrong and was solid enough for this level. I think he would be a squad player, though, and that's probably not what a loan signing needs to be. Whereas Ewan Henderson, with a great name, there's 2 of them in this video, Ewan would be a starter at any championship club based on his 6 starter appearances, and I would be delighted if we had him next season. So I think both have gone down pretty well. I think Ewan Henderson was probably a bit of a coup. I think realistically he could have been a Premiership player this season, whether it's Celtic or somewhere else. So yeah, it's going well at Dunfermline, he seems to be his creative prowess seems to have obviously he's created a few goals. He's taken a couple as well. Kerr McInroy, obviously he has that more kind of that deeper role. He's more of a sort of midfield kind of I don't know what you'd call them nowadays, a disruptor. But nothing necessarily flashy to his game, but has excellent leadership. Obviously, he's been the captain in the academy setup, and a solid 7 out of 10 is. I think that's actually pretty good from a loan spell, because if you're performing at a consistent basis and doing the basics right, then that's kind of the main function for me. It's good if players are scoring goals and creating highlights and all that stuff. That's all very exciting and that makes the papers. But ultimately from players who played in sort of less flashy positions, a solid 7 out of 10 is a pretty good review as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, the one worry just reading into those comments sent in by Ricky with regards to Kerr McInroy is how many Celtic youth players over the years have made it to the first team with being solid players and not spectacular players. People may comment below and give me a list of players who were solid and did it, but for me the players we've had coming through over the years have had something special about them. They've had to have something special about them to make it through to the first team. I wouldn't describe Callum McGregor, as much as he can be a 7 out of 10 most weeks, not this season admittedly, but in other seasons, I wouldn't describe him as just a kind of basic, without using demeaning terms towards McInroy's game, without ever having seen him play, the kind of terms that perhaps could be levelled at him. I just wonder if he has that bit of stardust to work his way into the Celtic setup. I certainly think Ewan Henderson does. It's one of the most kind of interesting things about the Celtic youth setup for me over the last few years is that Ewan Henderson hasn't seen more game time. Whenever I've seen him play, whether it be in that initial spurt he had in the first team back, I think right at the end of Brendan Rodgers' time at the club, or even this season when he played against Lille, came on as a sub that day, he's always impressed me. He's always looked to have a good eye for a pass, a really good first touch, a bit of skill about his game, and a good finish on him, a goal now and then as well, which is what you need. Almost quite similar to David Turnbull in that he probably doesn't have a great deal of pace, quite like Turnbull, but his good stuff comes from his ability on the ball and his brain and the way he plays the game. Always a step ahead of every other player in the pitch. So I really like Ewan Henderson, and I really want to see him given an opportunity, even if it's as a deputy to David Turnbull. But you're always wary, because why hasn't he been given more of a chance? This isn't just one manager, this is 2 managers, and we'll see what happens in the summer. 2 managers who have given him the odd chance, but have never given him a extended run in the team. Certainly Neil Lennon barely played him in his time at the club. So you're always wary, is he not doing it in training? Is he not as good as we think? But as a fan, looking in and seeing Ewan Henderson play every time he plays, I think that kid's got something.
Yeah, I think it's his positioning that's the main concern, because as we know, he can play both wings. He can play as a number 10. He can play deeper in the midfield. We saw him against Lille playing as a fine kind of right back, right full back, wing back, whatever you want to call him. And I think what would have been a really, really big advantage to this loan spell would have been nailing down one position. But he hasn't really done that. And I think that's more of a function of what Dunfermline have needed in their squad, in their team on a week-to-week basis. So we've seen him play left midfield. We've seen him play in a hole behind a striker. We've seen him play kind of multiple roles again. And versatility is a great thing, don't get me wrong. It's just when you're young, especially at that level, you really need to carve a niche for yourself. You really need to give a reason, why you should be in the first team at a particular position. And I think, having all that versatility is a good thing, but ultimately, I think that's actually maybe been the problem with him. Maybe Neil Lennon didn't really know where he was best to use him. And obviously, playing youngsters, as much as we want to see it, it's a risk at the end of the day for a manager to play a young player, especially in big games. And we've, certainly first half of the season, we played them. So yeah, I think there's concerns there about his long-term chances in terms of his starting position on the pitch. But I think the talent's there, certainly, yeah. And like you say, every time we've seen him play, we've come away impressed. So it's an interesting one. Definitely one to keep an eye on. I personally think he could probably use another spell away from the club. But that would certainly set alarm bells ringing, a la his brother, I guess.
Yeah, I think he's 21. I think he's just turned 21, so he is still very, very young, and it seems like he's been on the scene for ages, quite like his brother was when he left the club. But I think there are definite similarities between those two. Tell us about the Queen's Park trio that got promoted from League Two.
So this is a great story. Ross Laird was the man who gave us the info, and it's really, really good insight. So I asked him who's had the most kind of impact, because obviously there are three players there who have had different amounts of time in the squad. So Ross told me you'd probably say Connell in his 10 odd games had the greatest impact. He's looked really neat at times, and he's clearly quite a technical player. Despite his size, he's held his own, as well as popping up with some really important and impressive goals and assists. And he gives the goals against Albion Rovers and Brecon as examples. Now, Brodie Patterson, he's one that we haven't seen much of as Celtic supporters, but Queen's Park supporters haven't really seen much of him either. Ross goes on, Patterson, as I say, is an unknown quantity. He couldn't really push out Tommy Robson as first choice left back, but got a chance following Robson's injury. Really impressed by him. Some great runs up the wing, and hasn't really looked phased against more experienced players. Admittedly, being surrounded by relatively good quality players for that level, and a leader in Peter Grant, has probably helped him. And then he says, I can't really comment fairly on Ryan Mullen. I seem to remember he played close to half of a match and got injured. That said, he'd have to put some shift on in training to be remotely close to pushing out their starting goalkeeper. So, contrasted fortunes there. It's always difficult if you're a backup goalie, especially if you're signed on loan as a backup goalie. I mean, you essentially just sit on a bench in different colours, really. So it's been difficult, but definitely Luke O'Connell could have been playing at a much higher level this season.
Yeah, he's the one that is probably best that we pick out, because he's the one there's the most hope about. Again, he's another strange one, because he came from Bolton. He'd actually made a lot of appearances for Bolton. I know they were in a perilous financial position, and they still are, and they had to give opportunities to youth players to basically fill their team up. But he did look like a promising player, and I don't think has made a competitive appearance for Celtic. And as much as Queen's Park are a good team and a team that are on the up and have big plans, you do think that an Irish youth international who's already played games with Bolton down south would probably be going to a slightly higher level than that. So at the time I found that quite an interesting one. It sounds like he's had a pretty good time of it, judging from Ross's report. One thing I wanted to pick out was that comment about him perhaps going missing a little bit in close games, and when games get tight. That would probably be a worry for a player if he's doing that in League Two, if we're hoping to get him to play for Celtic one day.
Yeah, maybe, but it's also kind of a function of his position. As a creative player, nominally kind of a number 10. That kind of does happen. I mean, even fantastic Celtic players like Shinsuke Nakamura could go missing in games. But all you need sometimes is that one or two moments of transcendental quality to make a game to win the 3 points. So yeah, possibly. I think it's actually quite a good level for him in hindsight. At the time, I was as shocked as anyone that he was going to join a League Two side, obviously with his pedigree and the potential there. But I think in terms of physicality, I mean, it's really obvious to say like, if you go to League 1 or 2, you'll be up against jobbers from the SPFL who are wanting to half you every tackle. But I think there's stuff that you could take away and really develop his game. And it's probably a good confidence thing as well, because he'll probably have expected more starts. So for him to go to a tier he's comfortably, has the ability for, and just boss it for half a season is probably a good thing for his confidence. And he can take that in the pre-season and really impress the next Celtic manager. So, and it was good to hear about Brodie Patterson too, because he's another name that's been touted by the Celtic Academy staff. And again, we've never really seen much of him. I think it'd be good for him to get another season of lower league experience under his belt, because there's Adam Montgomery ahead of him in the queue, and Celtic will sign another young left back, you would have thought. So it probably serves him well to try his luck elsewhere.
So Queen's Park promoted to Scottish League One. A team that was already playing there this season was Clyde. You spoke to Dylan McDonald, who, just on a side note, does the Talking Boss Scottish Lower League podcast, which is a very good listen if you're that way inclined. And you were chatting to him about Ewan Oghene. Now, have I said his surname correctly? I
believe so. If you want to get in touch and have a chat, Ewan, then please do. So this is a really interesting guy. So Ewan Oghene, we plucked him from a youth academy within Glasgow. He's of, I think he's got both Scottish and Ghanaian citizenship, but he's played at youth international level for Scotland, I believe. So that's a really exciting one. Now, I didn't know much about him. I'll admit I thought he was either a centre-back or a defensive midfielder, just based on kind of match reports from years ago. But it turns out he's a left-back, and according to Dylan McDonald, it's a really exciting one. So Dylan says, for me, he's been a standout loan signing of the season, alongside Lewis Jameson from St Mirren. Dylan talks about his energy levels during a relentless fixture schedule, and he's got a level-headed approach and calmness on and off the ball that would make you think that he's been playing regular first-team football for years. Dylan was particularly impressed with his energy driving up and down the wing, both from an attacking and defensive point of view. His defensive positioning was mostly good, but over time that will improve with more regular game time. As per some of the highlights from Ewan's time at the club, it's clear to see he's confident in driving forward and trying to create opportunities. And he says that himself and other fans would love to see Ewan Oghene coming back. And fingers crossed. So that's quite a glowing review.
Dylan raises quite an interesting point there, in that he mentions about the prospect, or the very real possibility, that Celtic will have a Colts team in the Lowland League next year. Yeah. And he just ponders whether Celtic would rather a player like Oghene loaned out to a League One side, or playing in a lower division, two leagues lower, the Lowland League, but still being on Celtic's books. Do you think we'll see Celtic loaning out as many of these kind of players to teams like Clyde and teams like Queen's Park next season? Or will the club look to use that Lowland League to their advantage?
I think it's an interesting one. I think the Lowland League stuff, the Colts team that we're getting for what season, I think that'll be for even younger players than this. So we're talking about players that are between 18 and 21 who have been in the academy for a considerable length of time already. I think it actually serves them better to go out on loan at SPLFL clubs. I mean, now we have an idea of what Oghene plays like. We didn't before. We have an idea about Kieran McInroy's qualities, all these players, and I think it would serve them much better to be playing, regular first team football at a level above the Lowland League. I think that stands to reason. But what I think we will see from the Colts team is more of the players who are sort of 16, 17, kind of on the cusp of kind of physically developing into professional footballers. I think that's more the kind of thing we'll see. I don't think we should expect to walk away with it, because as much as it is a Lowland League, we're talking about players that are going to be at least 5-6 years the junior of the players they'll be coming up against. So that physicality will make a difference. I think one of the arguments that people had against the cult teams was that Celtic and Rangers will come in and dominate. I don't think that's going to be the case at all. So I think it'll be a valuable education for them, but I think we're talking maybe 16, 17-year-olds playing the Colts team. And in terms of these guys, this crop of players between the latter half of 17, 18 up to 21, I don't really see how the Colts would actually develop them in a meaningful way. I think we're talking the first kind of first team experience at a decent level for a lot of these players, and I don't think that would suit like Ewan Oghene.
A player playing at a bit of a higher level than that, is fair to say, this season was Leo Connor. He spent the season at Tranmere. He's been a virtual ever-present for them since the start of February. And you spoke to Tranmere fan Adam Fraser. What did he have to say?
Again, very, very encouraging stuff, and thanks to Adam for his input. He said that Lee's been very good when he's played. He plugged a hole at right back, which had been a little bit of a problem position for a couple of years at Tranmere. Took him a little while to get going, but Tranmere were better for it, Adam says. O'Connor seemed fairly decent in defence and played well in the build-up to an attack. He's very versatile from what Adam's seen, playing at centre-back when he needs to as well. So again, versatility, that's a key attribute. And really encouragingly, Adam said he can't think of anything that Lee O'Connor needs to work on specifically. He seems like a big fish in a small pond in League Two. Now, obviously, Lee O'Connor came through the academy at Manchester United, so there's obvious pedigree there. But Adam doesn't see Lee O'Connor coming back to Tranmere unless they get promoted to League One. Now, Tranmere are kind of perennially a League One side, so it's a little bit surprising to see them relegated in the first place. So they're kind of going back to their rightful place, if you will. But yeah, it's been an encouraging season for Lee O'Connor, even though the situation at Tranmere is kind of bonkers. Like, they reached the playoffs and then sacked their manager immediately because he was boring the life out of fans. I think they only got 2 wins in 11 or something like that. So, who knows?
The big fish in a small pond comment was the one that stood out for me. I think O'Connor, 20 at the moment, he'll be 21 at the start of next season, so he's another one that's still very young. I thought it was good that he got out on loan. I feel like he went to a level that I would expect, and a decent enough level. I think English League 2 is a decent level. You play a lot of football. It's not a bad kind of place to earn your stripes as a professional footballer.
Yeah,
I know he had the spell at Partick Thistle last year that I don't think really worked out. He's another strange one in the sense that you look at someone who on the face of it looked very similar to him, Jeremy Frimpong, and you look at how quickly he got into the Celtic first team after joining and turned into a 10-11 million pound player who's now playing in Bundesliga. Maybe O'Connor just isn't of that standard, and maybe we just need to accept that, but they certainly look to have pretty similar paths. You know, Frimpong had been at Man City, O'Connor had been at Man United. I noticed in the report from Adam that he'd been played at centre-back a little bit this season. He could certainly fill in there. Bit surprised at that with him, without meaning to sound heightist here, but he is only 5'9". I'm surprised that he could play at centre-back. But then I was thinking that when we signed him, I think he was a centre-back. I don't think he was a right-back. I think he played for the Irish national team. He's a fully fledged international for Ireland. He's had a cap for the full team in a friendly against New Zealand, and he played at right back in that game. And then I think ever since then he's been seen as a right back. But the problem was that when he was trying to make his breakthrough last season, we were stacked at right back. We had Frimpong, Elhamed and Bauer. We now have none of them at the club. So you would hope that Lee O'Connor could come in and make some sort of impact next season. I certainly have quite high hopes for him if he's done quite well at Tranmere. And that comment about being a big fish in a small pond is quite a good one, I think, in terms of it says that he's almost too good for that league. So I've got high hopes for O'Connor, but again, there's just something just missing at the moment. Why has he not had a chance yet? A bit like Luca Connell, a bit like Afolabi. If these guys are so good for the Ireland youth setup, why have they not at least had one chance to play for Celtic?
Well, no, it's an interesting point, and he would have thought with obviously kind of his footballing upbringing that Lee O'Connor might have been a better bet than say Annie Ralston. No harm to the guy, but I just don't think it's ever really going to work out for him at Celtic. So it's interesting. It was probably the best decision to make to send him out on loan. Obviously, if he's not doing enough in training, then he's got valuable experience. Because not only do League Two, I think they play between 42 and 46 games. I can't quite remember, but they've also got 3 cup competitions as well. So, you're not exactly struggling for minutes at that level.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good thing. But yeah, again, it's going to be another really interesting pre-season because what Lee O'Connor kind of brings, do we know if he's an out-and-out right-back? What kind of right-back is he in that case? And also being able to play at centre-back as well as right-back. I think that's going to be a modern kind of... That'll be a thing that you see in the years to come where there's more versatility in defensive positions. In the same way that, a lot of wingers, a lot of wide forwards can play either flank. With the kind of the back three becoming more fashionable, different systems kind of coming into use, I think you'll see right-backs turn centre-backs. Kind of like like Hatem El Hamid, you know, he was someone who could play both positions, and I think that's something that Celtic were. Lustig's another perfect example, yeah. So I think that's something that you will see more of in years to come, and maybe Leo Connor is going to be, you know, a new version of that. I don't quite know, but what's clear is, you know, he's made an impression at Tranmere, and whether we loan him out again at a higher level or he gets a chance in the first team, he's in limbo because he's certainly too good to play for the Colts, but he's probably not quite ready for the Celtic first team yet. So it's an interesting. It's an interesting situation he finds himself in. Whether he's going to start getting frustrated and want to move permanently is anyone's guess. But you'd have thought with the contract he signed and the fact that Man United fans were quite agreed to losing him, you'd have thought there's probably an opportunity there for him in the future at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's exciting times, and there's going to be an opportunity for lots of these players to get chances at Celtic in the summer because they're going to have a new manager in, but also we're going to have a squad that is pretty bare when the new manager first comes in. I mean, that first training session is going to be pretty sparse at Lennoxtown, and as a result, I think these young guys are going to be involved. And if they put in a few good training sessions, impress the manager with their work rate and the way they're committed, and then perhaps play a pre-season friendly or two and perform well, it's not out with the realms of possibility. You could see someone like a Luke O'Connell, a Leo Connor, a Barry Coffey, a Jonathan Afolabi, a Scott Robertson forging their way into at least the new manager's plans for next season. But it's always hard to tell, isn't it? I mean, if we'd have been doing this a year ago, I don't think we would have had Stephen Welsh as a first team Celtic player, because he was on loan, I think, at Morton. He'd had a bit of a tough time at it. Certainly wasn't seen as a shining light or a standout player for Morton, and then suddenly he's starting for Celtic. So much of it is circumstance and taking your opportunity when you're given it. But interesting times ahead, Ewan. We've gone on a bit on this video. We've given you a bit of a longer video, but great work, Ewan. Very good. Remember to subscribe to the channel. It would really be appreciated as we continue to motor through the subs. And yeah, we'll speak to you soon. Take care and hail hail.